Good morning, I'm Adam Sexton. We're just a few weeks away now from the 119th Congress of the United States being sworn in. New Hampshire's 2nd District will have a new freshman member, and she is our guest this morning on Close Up. Congresswoman-elect Maggie Goodlander, thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me, Adam.
And congratulations, by the way.
Thank you.
As well.
Thank you.
Let's start by looking ahead. You're going to be in the minority, but not by much by the numbers. As you've been down there in Washington for orientation and all that, are you getting the sense that this is going to be a little different on Capitol Hill with that very narrowly divided Congress?
Well, it is a narrow majority that we have, Adam, and it's historically narrow in some respects, but not unprecedented. And look, what I'm looking forward to doing is exactly what I heard from voters all across the 2nd District on the campaign trail, which is to be laser focused on actually getting things done. And that's the spirit that I've been bringing to our work over the last month since the election, and that's exactly what I'm going to do for the next month. It's exactly 4 weeks from today that I'll be sworn in, January 3rd at 12 noon. And in the meantime, you know, the orientation has been an extraordinary process, I would say. I've learned a lot about just the mechanics of how I will actually cast a vote. The rules of procedure for the United States House of Representatives, which were first authored by Thomas Jefferson, so it's a long history in that institution. And I've had the chance to meet my colleagues, newly elected colleagues and colleagues who have been there for many years, Democrats and Republicans alike, who are laser focused, as I am, on getting things done and delivering for the people of New Hampshire.
You know, Republicans have been talking a big game about cutting spending and bureaucratic restructuring. Elon Musk is kind of dabbling in governance a little bit now. Is there a spending cut or a big change that you can get on board with?
You know, the spirit I want to bring to this work is to find common ground to deliver for the people of New Hampshire, and to stand my ground and to stand up for our Constitution and for the people of New Hampshire where I have to. And, you know, as I look at the federal budget, you know, one thing that stands out to me, and this is something that's been noted by Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy, which is that the Pentagon hasn't had a full-on audit in far too long. And this is something I think that any American should expect of their government, that hundreds of millions of dollars should not be a rounding error in this day and age. And so I am focused on making cuts and bringing about efficiencies wherever we possibly can. But at the same time, Adam, I'm going to be laser focused on protecting the programs, Social Security, Medicare programs, the Affordable Care Act, programs that are the bedrock of the promises that we've made to the American people. And I will protect those programs with everything I've got.
You know, it's not clear yet. Republicans themselves seem to be split on some of those issues, what's going to happen and what's not in the Congress. It seems like there's more consensus among Republicans, and certainly with President-elect Trump, with tariffs. Your district obviously goes all the way up to the Canadian border, and Quebec is a huge trading partner with New Hampshire. What would be the impact if that 10% across-the-board tariff on Canadian trade comes across and President Trump puts that in effect for goods coming to New Hampshire? What would be the effect in your district?
Well, look, this is something, there's a lot of talk about tariffs, and oftentimes, and especially when it comes to tariffs, the devil is in the details. So I would want to study any proposal very carefully and make sure that whatever's being suggested is not going to unduly punish the people of New Hampshire. Canada is an incredibly important trading partner for us, and I'm going to be laser focused on protecting the hardworking people here.
You got to celebrate a victory on November 5th. It was not a good night, obviously, overall for your party. Why did so many swing voters across the country choose Trump and Republicans over Democrats?
You know, Adam, one of the beauties of being here in New Hampshire is we have competitive elections. And on the campaign trail, we ran an old school New Hampshire campaign. We worked hard for every single vote. And I was laser focused on the issues that I was hearing about from people all across this state. The pain of high prices in particular, and the housing crisis that we face now. We've got a lot of work to do, and I'm laser focused on addressing those challenges. And I think that is what the people of New Hampshire deserve. People serving in the People's House who are going to be focused on solving problems, and that's where my focus lies.
The Biden administration was just in front of the Supreme Court arguing in favor of access to gender reassignment surgery for minors. Do you think that's something most Americans support, sex change surgeries for kids?
You know, Adam, I think these issues are ones that I haven't heard about as much on the campaign trail as I think, you know, when I was down at orientation, there was a bill introduced in the House that was designed to generate and to distract and to create a lot of attention around an issue that's not the focus of me or the colleagues who I really look forward to working with in the House. And so I'm focused on the issues that are really going to matter. Look, I think when it comes to this issue, to me, this is an issue about freedom. It's an issue about human dignity at the end of the day. I believe that everyone in this country, especially the most vulnerable among us, deserves the protection and the respect and the dignity that our Constitution affords each of us. And I am going to be a representative for all people here in the 2nd District, and that's the spirit I'm going to bring to this work.
But for minors, do you think that surgery like that is appropriate?
Look, you know, I'm not a medical professional, and this is a decision that really resides with doctors and families and patients. And this is not a judgment that I'm equipped to make, or frankly, any politician should be making.
Democrats are trying to rebuild their brand. Too many voters see the party as elite and out of touch. How much worse did President Biden make that problem by pardoning his own son?
You know, Adam, as I've said, I'm very concerned about the precedent that the president's pardon has set. The pardon power is an extraordinary power in our Constitution. It's one that cannot be checked by the other branches of government. And every pardon sets a precedent. And I'm very concerned about the precedent that this pardon sets. I'm concerned about what this precedent could be used to do to undermine the rule of law and the integrity of our justice system in the days ahead.
You know, you've taught the law. You've talked about teaching college students, you know, there's the letter and the spirit of the law. Certainly what President Biden did was legal, but did he undermine the rule of law by issuing this pardon?
You know, I think that this is, you know, as I said, every pardon is a precedent, and it's one that really stands for all of time. Just as Supreme Court decisions are issued, when a president issues a pardon, it's a decision that future presidents will look to. And I am very concerned about the ways in which this precedent could be used by President-elect Trump in the days ahead to undermine the rule of law.
Is the blanket nature of this pardon an indicator, perhaps, that there were more crimes that Hunter Biden could have been prosecuted for? The idea that, essentially, if he was innocent, why would he need a pardon like this?
You know, I think the scope of the pardon is one that I had questions about, and it is. As I said, every pardon is a precedent, and there is precedent for pardons structured in this way that are broader. But the scope of the pardon is certainly part of what makes the precedent so concerning.
It's been reported that President Biden is considering preemptive pardons for other individuals and officials who theoretically could be targeted by the incoming Trump administration. Adam Schiff, the senator-elect, former Congresswoman Liz Cheney, Dr. Fauci, just to name a few. Along the lines that we were just talking about, if he does that, isn't he making them look guilty, whether they are or not?
You know, we are at an inflection point, Adam, and we are facing uncharted territory when it comes to potential threats to the rule of law and to our system of justice. We have people who President-elect Trump has suggested he may put into positions of public trust and power, who have been very clear about their intentions to use the Justice Department and the FBI not to advance the common good and the public interest, but to go after their personal political enemies, people who they've called their enemies. And this is really a very dangerous thing for our country, and it's why I'm really laser focused on what I can do as a member of Congress to stand up for our Constitution, to stand our ground in making sure that we've got the kind of checks and balances in this country that we're going to need in order for our democracy to continue.
Moving on to another issue here. Do you support the mass deportation of illegal immigrants who've committed crimes?
You know, I think when you say mass deportation, I think these are terms that have been thrown around. I believe that. So I guess your question is,
would you support the mass deportation of illegal immigrants who've committed crimes, who are either in jail or awaiting adjudication on criminal violations?
You know, I think our system is designed to uphold the rule of law and to have due process for people in our immigration courts. What I saw firsthand at the Justice Department was that our immigration courts are underfunded, that our system of immigration laws is outdated, and it's in desperate need of an update. That's why I was really proud early in my career to work for Senator John McCain, who brought a bipartisan group of 8 senators together to take a hard look at our immigration laws and our border security, and to propose a framework for the future. And it passed through the United States Senate when no one thought it was possible. As I said on the campaign trail, I continue to be really focused on finding common ground and bipartisan solutions. And that's that's the spirit in which I'm going to work, Adam.
Do you support it, though? The idea that to go after people who've committed crimes first and get them out of the country?
I believe in Congress's role in properly funding our immigration courts and our immigration system, and in making sure that we have immigration laws that can meet this moment. I do not believe in sort of suggestions of mass deportations that have no connection to upholding the laws that Congress is responsible for writing. The Constitution couldn't be clearer that when it comes to our immigration laws, Congress has a responsibility, and that is one that I take very seriously.
And mass deportation, though, this term, it's used, this was one of the most consistent promises from President-elect Trump on the campaign trail, and voters endorsed that. So you're saying that they've got it wrong? My job as a member of Congress is to write the immigration laws, to make sure that we have a funded immigration system. And that is what I'm going to be focused on doing. And I believe deeply that we are a nation of immigrants, and that's what this country is all about. I wouldn't be here if we hadn't had immigration laws more than a century ago that allowed my great-grandfather at the age of 16, he didn't speak a word of English, to come to this country through Ellis Island. He got a job as a dishwasher in New York City, and he made his way to Nashua, where he built the farm. I grew up down the road from that farm, and that was all possible because we had immigration laws and a system that could meet that moment. Our laws are outdated, and our system is underfunded, and I'm going to be laser focused on finding common ground to make sure that we have immigration laws and a system that can meet this moment. All right, Congresswoman-elect Maggie Goodlander, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you back here soon.
Thank you, Adam.
Appreciate it. And we'll be right back with newly elected New Hampshire Senate President Sharon Carson. Stay with us.